The lecture hall was dimly lit, the stale smell of chalk and paper clinging to the air. Rows of tired students sat scribbling notes, but one hand remained raised, trembling slightly with determination. Anna, a graduate student barely in her 20s, locked eyes with Professor Harland, a man twice her age whose reputation was built on crushing dissent. His sharp voice cut through the room like a blade. "You expect us to believe," he sneered, "that a tomb hidden for over 3,000 years, one that every Egyptologist has failed to find, will suddenly appear because you noticed a few odd scratches on a manuscript." His laughter was dry, calculated, meant to humiliate. The class chuckled nervously, some shifting uncomfortably, others grateful it wasn't their theory being ridiculed. Anna's face flushed crimson, but her resolve hardened. She had spent months poring over the manuscript that most scholars dismissed as trivial. In its fading ink, she had traced patterns others overlooked, symbols that hinted at a burial site erased from official records. Her voice was quiet, but steady. "I believe the manuscript holds a hidden code, Professor. A code pointing to the resting place of a forgotten queen." Harlan scoffed, his polished shoes clicking as he paced the front of the lecture hall. Fairy tales. Egyptian queens were recorded meticulously. There is no such phantom. Inside, however, doubt stirred. He remembered the long nights he himself had stared at half-deciphered glyphs, haunted by questions he couldn't answer. Yet pride outweighed curiosity. He couldn't let a student undermine his authority. Anna, sensing the sting of rejection, recalled her late father's voice. He had been a quiet archaeologist, dismissed as eccentric, who believed history hid more than it revealed. He had died searching for answers in the desert, leaving her only his battered notebook and unfinished dreams. Now, facing Harlan's cruelty, she clenched her hands under the desk. "I won't let him silence me too." The professor leaned closer, lowering his voice but sharpening the cruelty. "Miss Carter, ambition without evidence is delusion. Spare us the embarrassment." He expected her to shrink, to retreat, as so many before her had. But she met his gaze, her blue eyes cold with defiance. The room shifted. Some students whispered, others felt a prickle of unease. A revelation sparkled in Anna's mind. She remembered a detail from the manuscript she hadn't dared share publicly. A faint line of hieroglyphs that seemed to reference removal from memory. It suggested deliberate erasure, a queen condemned to vanish from history. She stood, her voice carrying across the hall. "If history erased her, Professor, then it's our duty to find her. Dismissing what doesn't fit your theories won't change the truth buried beneath the sand." The silence that followed was heavy, suffocating. Harland froze, his lips tightening. For a brief second, an old fear flickered in him, fear that she might be right. But pride roared louder. "Sit down," he snapped. "We deal in facts, not fantasies." Yet in that moment, Anna had planted a seed. The classmates who had laughed now leaned forward, curious. Could there truly be a queen erased from time? Harland, though he would never admit it, felt the ground of his authority crack. Later that night, alone in his office, he pored over Anna's presentation again. The markings, the symbols, the stubborn way she insisted they aligned. His thoughts darkened. If she were right, his career would be reduced to dust under her discovery. He couldn't allow that. "If there is a tomb," he thought grimly, "I will be the one to claim it." But in the shadows of the lecture hall earlier, Anna had whispered to herself words only she could hear. "For you, Father, I will finish what you started." The battle lines were drawn, though neither had spoken them aloud. One fueled by arrogance, the other by legacy. Neither yet knew that their conflict would lead to the sands of Egypt, where truth and betrayal waited beneath stone and silence. And so it began, the arrogant professor, mocking, the underestimated student defiant. A clash not just of theories, but of pride, memory, and the hunger for justice. If you're enjoying this story of justice and hidden strength, don't forget to subscribe to the channel to find out how a simple act of prejudice turned into the most valuable lesson of Professor Harlan's life. The stage was set. Soon, Egypt would call them both, and the desert would decide who history remembered. Anna sat hunched over her desk in the campus library, the pale glow of her laptop screen illuminating tired eyes. Around her, the silence was thick, broken only by the occasional shuffle of a page or the creak of an old chair. She spread the fragile manuscript carefully across the table, a treasure she had borrowed under the pretext of a translation project. Its ink was faded, but she knew its secrets were intact. Her fingers traced the lines of hieroglyphs she had copied dozens of times. To most, they looked like little more than ceremonial script, common praises to forgotten gods. But she saw something else, slight variations in repeated symbols, markings so deliberate they could not be mistakes. "You're not a hymn," she whispered under her breath. "You're a map." Her pulse quickened as she flipped through her notebook, filled with drawings and translations. In the margins, she had sketched what looked like coordinates, pieces of a puzzle that pointed toward the western desert beyond Luxor. She remembered her father's stories, told when she was a child sitting cross-legged by his side. He spoke of missing queens, women powerful enough to be feared, erased from history by men who wanted their legacy buried. History hides its most dangerous truths, he had told her. Across the campus, Professor Harlan sat in his study, staring into a glass of scotch. Anna's words still gnawed at him. If history erased her, then it's our duty to find her. He wanted to laugh it off, yet he couldn't stop picturing the possibility. His career had been built on dismissing fantasies and presenting himself as the guardian of reason. But what if she uncovered something monumental? What if a 22-year-old student destroyed everything he had spent decades building? Harlan's lips twisted into a thin smile. "She won't," he muttered, "because I'll stop her before she even begins." His pride demanded control. If there was indeed a queen, he would claim her discovery as his own, rewriting the story with himself at the center. Meanwhile, Anna's hands shook as she discovered something new. Hidden in the hieroglyphs was a phrase she had missed before. "The one who defied the king shall rest where the sun dies." Her breath caught. Could this mean a queen who stood against Pharaoh himself? She pictured a defiant woman in ancient times, silenced by the chisels of those who followed. A queen too dangerous to be remembered. Anna's heart pounded. She couldn't do this alone. She needed resources, a team. Travel permits things she couldn't obtain as a mere student. But she also couldn't trust Harlan. He had already humiliated her. He would never support her work in good faith. Still, a reckless thought surged. Maybe his arrogance could be her weapon. The next morning, Anna requested a meeting. Harlan sat at his polished oak desk, his office adorned with framed certificates and photographs of digs where he alone stood in the spotlight. Anna placed the manuscript in front of him. "Look again," she said firmly. "The markings form a path. They lead west, beyond Luxor." He raised an eyebrow, feigning boredom. Inside, his pulse raced. He saw it now, faint patterns he had missed before. But he wouldn't let her see his interest. "Patterns are the refuge of the desperate," he said coolly. "You're chasing ghosts." Her jaw tightened. "Then prove me wrong. Come with me, let's test the theory." The challenge hung heavy between them. Harlan leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. To dismiss her publicly again was one option. But another possibility stirred in him, traveling with her, controlling the expedition, and ensuring any discovery bore his name. "Fine," he said at last, his tone dripping with condescension. "I'll indulge your fantasy. Consider it a teaching moment." Anna turned to leave, hiding the flicker of triumph in her eyes. She had baited the trap, and he had walked in willingly. As she closed the office door, her thoughts echoed with her father's words. History hides its truths, but truth waits for those brave enough to dig. That night, under the soft hum of fluorescent lights in the library, Anna spread maps across the table. Her coordinates aligned perfectly with a stretch of desert few had studied. The excitement was electric, but so was the danger. She knew Harlan's ego would never let her succeed unchallenged. Still, she whispered into the silence. We're coming, my queen. They tried to erase you, but we will find you. Far away, in the shifting sands of Egypt, an ancient tomb lay sealed in darkness, its stones heavy with silence. It had waited for millennia, holding secrets of betrayal, power, and defiance. And now, for the first time in centuries, footsteps were coming. The flight to Cairo was long, but Anna barely noticed. She sat by the window, her notebook open, the manuscript carefully wrapped in protective sleeves in her bag. Every few minutes, she glanced at it, as if afraid it might vanish. Across the aisle, Professor Harlan sipped wine with the air of a man embarking on a vacation rather than a research trip. His smug smile never faltered. The contrast between them was stark. Anna's nerves buzzed with anticipation. Harlan's mind schemed with calculation. He had already drafted a press release in his head, phrases about his discovery, his brilliance, his leadership. The student would be a footnote at best. When they arrived, the desert heat smothered them instantly. Cairo's noise and chaos were overwhelming, but Anna's eyes shone with purpose. She had arranged for a local guide, Karim, a wiry man with sun-darkened skin and a deep respect for the land. His grandfather had been a tomb keeper, and he spoke of the desert as if it were alive. Karim squinted at Anna's map. These coordinates, strange. Few go there. The sands shift, bury everything. Some say curses lie beneath. Harlan rolled his eyes. Superstition. But inside, he felt a twinge of unease. His rational mind dismissed it. Yet his heart quickened at the mention of curses. They set out across the vast expanse, a convoy of camels and gear-laden jeeps. The desert stretched endlessly, dunes rising like waves in a frozen sea. At night, the stars burned so brightly Anna felt she could fall into them. She lay awake, hearing her father's voice. The desert keeps its secrets until the right eyes look upon them. On the third day, Karim led them to a crumbling ruin, half swallowed by sand. Faded carvings clung to its stones. Anna brushed the grit away, revealing a faint symbol, the same hieroglyph repeated in the manuscript. Her heart leapt. It's here, she whispered. We're close. Harlan crouched beside her, feigning disinterest, but his hands shook as he touched the stone. He knew this symbol. He had seen fragments of it before, dismissed by others as decorative. Yet here it was, anchoring Anna's wild theory in reality. Could she truly be right? That night, Anna sat by the fire, sketching the ruins, while Harlan retreated into his tent. He stared at his reflection in a metal flask, his thoughts dark. If she finds it first, the world will laugh at me. A professor undone by his student, rage burned in his chest. He couldn't allow it. Meanwhile, Karim shared an old tale with Anna. His grandfather had spoken of a queen whose name was forbidden, whose tomb was hidden by priests loyal to Pharaoh. They say she tried to rule alone, without a king. For this, her name was chiseled from every wall. Anna's pulse quickened. It matched the phrase she had read, the one who defied the king. She looked toward the ruins, silhouetted against the stars. She's here. I can feel her. Harlan, listening from the shadows, felt a shiver. The idea of a queen powerful enough to be erased unsettled him. But stronger still was envy. If Anna revealed her tomb, the world would remember her name long after his was forgotten. The following morning, Anna uncovered a fragment of stone half buried in sand. She brushed it clean, revealing a carving of a woman's face, strong, defiant. Unlike the serene images of other queens, her breath caught. Tears filled her eyes. It's her, she murmured. Harlan stepped closer, his shadow falling over the carving. Careful, Miss Carter, he said coldly. Don't jump to conclusions. This could be anyone. Yet even as he spoke, his heart pounded with fear and excitement. The desert had revealed its first secret, but greater mysteries lay beneath, and already betrayal stirred like a storm on the horizon. By the fifth day in the desert, the expedition's camp had grown tense. Anna's eyes sparkled with each new fragment she uncovered, tiny shards of pottery, faint carvings on stone. To her, Each piece was another heartbeat in the silence of 3,000 years. To Harland, they were daggers, cutting into his pride. That evening, as the fire cast flickering shadows, Harland sat apart from the group, staring into the flames. His thoughts twisted bitterly. She doesn't even realize it. Every discovery she makes, she's digging my grave. They'll call her the genius, the visionary, and me, the fool who mocked her. The idea burned like acid. Karim noticed the professor's brooding silence. "You do not seem pleased, sir," he said carefully. Harland forced a tight smile. "Just tired." But inside, a darker plan had already begun to form. If Anna stumbled, if her evidence proved faulty, he could declare the entire venture a student's folly. His name would remain intact, while hers would be reduced to ashes. The next morning, Anna approached the ruins with renewed determination. She compared the carvings with her father's old notebook, the one she kept hidden from Harland. It contained sketches that looked eerily similar to what she was finding. She whispered to herself, "You were right, father. You were right all along." Harland loomed behind her. "Still chasing fairy tales?" he said, his voice smooth, almost amused. Anna didn't flinch. "Look closer, Professor. This isn't a fairy tale, it's a trail. And it's leading us somewhere they never wanted us to find." Her words struck him harder than she knew. That phrase, "they never wanted us to find," echoed against his buried fears. Harland had always dismissed talk of deliberate erasures, but deep down he remembered a discovery from his own past. Years ago, he had unearthed a fragment of wall, where a name had been chiseled out. He ignored it then, afraid it would damage his career if he chased shadows. Now, seeing Anna follow the same trail he once abandoned filled him with dread and envy. That night, when Anna returned to her tent, she found her papers slightly disturbed, her maps folded wrong, her gut twisted. She knew Harland had been snooping. She pressed her father's notebook to her chest, whispering, "I won't let him take this from me." The next day, Karim led them deeper into the ruins, where shifting sands had exposed a partially collapsed chamber. The air was cooler there, the silence heavier. Anna ran her fingers along the wall and gasped. There it was again, the same hieroglyph, half buried but unmistakable. "This is it," she breathed. "We're so close." Harland crouched beside her, forcing a chuckle. "Don't get ahead of yourself, Miss Carter. These ruins are full of false leads." But his hand trembled as he touched the stone. In his mind, a poisonous thought took hold. "If I can't stop her, I'll steal her triumph. I'll claim it before she does." That evening, under the canopy of stars, Karim told another story passed down from his grandfather. They said the queen's spirit guards her tomb. Any who seek her for greed will face ruin. Only those who seek her for truth will be blessed. Anna listened with reverence, her heart swelling. Harland scoffed aloud, but inside, he shivered. The words felt like an omen aimed directly at him. In the quiet hours before dawn, Harland crept into Anna's tent again. This time, he took careful notes of her coordinates, her translations, her every deduction. Standing over her sleeping form, he felt a twisted satisfaction. Let her dig. When the time comes, it will be my name the world remembers. But as he left, Anna stirred, half awake, and caught the faint scent of his cologne. Her stomach sank. She knew, with chilling certainty, that the real danger wasn't buried in the sands, it was sitting across from her at the fire. The ruins loomed larger now, the air heavy with secrets. And between Anna and Harland, the line between ally and adversary had begun to vanish. The desert would soon demand a price, and only one of them would be ready to pay it. The desert wind carried whispers through the ruins, tugging at Anna's hair as she leaned close to a half-buried wall. Her lantern's glow revealed faint etchings, hieroglyphs, weathered but still legible. She traced them carefully, her heart quickening. The symbols spoke of betrayal, of a queen who had defied Pharaoh's will. Anna's lips moved silently as she translated. Her name shall be cut away, her memory erased, her body sealed where the sun's last shadow falls. Karim watched quietly from behind, His grandfather had told him this very story of a queen who stood against the gods and men alike. His eyes darkened with reverence. They called her cursed, he murmured. But cursed only because she was powerful. Anna turned to him, her voice steady but filled with awe. If this is true, then she wasn't cursed. She was silenced. The thought sent a shiver down her spine. A woman powerful enough to be remembered only by whispers buried not for weakness, but for strength. Harland, lingering just beyond the light, scowled. He had heard every word. Inwardly, a bitter monologue raged. Powerful, silenced, erased, nonsense. She's romanticizing scraps of stone. And yet, if the world believes her story, it will not matter what I say. She will be the visionary, and I the relic. His jaw tightened until it ached. That night, as the camp settled under the weight of silence, Anna lay awake in her tent, clutching her father's notebook. She remembered the stories he told her, his insistence that truth lived where others refused to look. "They'll laugh at you," he once said, "until the day they can't." A tear slipped down her cheek. She whispered to the darkness, "I'll make them see, Father. I'll finish your work." Meanwhile, Harland scribbled furiously in his own journal. He copied Anna's notes, her translations, her coordinates, every piece of evidence that would allow him to claim the discovery as his. But a small voice gnawed at him, one he hadn't heard in years. It reminded him of his own beginnings, when he too was laughed at, dismissed by arrogant professors. Back then, he had sworn to prove himself. Now, decades later, he had become the very figure he once despised. He slammed his pen down, furious at the memory. No, he thought, this is different. She is reckless. She is naive. I am the one who deserves this glory. The following morning, Anna and Karim pressed deeper into the ruins. They uncovered a series of carvings hidden beneath layers of sand. The figures depicted a woman standing alone, her arms raised defiantly, while men with chisels struck her name from the walls. Anna's breath caught. "It's her," she said softly. "They tried to erase her, but she's still here." Karim's voice trembled. "My grandfather said her spirit would rise again when the right seeker found her. Perhaps you are that seeker." Harlan stepped forward, his tone sharp. "Enough of this superstition. These carvings could represent any number of figures. Don't project your fantasies onto them." But even as he spoke, his eyes betrayed him. He couldn't deny the chilling accuracy, the deliberate erasure, the Queen's defiant stance. Anna turned to him, her gaze unwavering. "Why are you so afraid of her, Professor? Because if she exists, then everything you've built your career on, every dismissal, every lecture, every mockery, was wrong?" His face hardened, but inside, her words pierced like daggers. For the first time, some students around them exchanged uncertain glances. The balance of power was shifting. That evening, Karim recited a final fragment of legend by the fire. "They say the Queen's tomb lies beyond the ruins, beneath the desert's last shadow, but beware those who seek her out of pride will be consumed by it." The words struck both Anna and Harlan differently. To Anna, they were a vow. To Harlan, a warning he refused to heed. As the fire crackled low, Anna traced her father's notebook with her fingertips. The coordinates were clear. Tomorrow, they would search beyond the ruins into the untouched desert. Her heart pounded with hope and dread. "We are close. I can feel her calling." Harlan lay awake in his tent, staring at the ceiling. The desert wind howled like a voice mocking him. His thoughts churned with venom. "If she finds it, I will take it. I will stand in front of the cameras. I will rewrite history in my name. She will be forgotten, as she should be." The night grew colder, the sand shifting restlessly outside their camp. Somewhere beneath it, the Queen waited, her silence heavier than stone. And as dawn approached, betrayal began to sharpen its blade. Dawn burned pale across the dunes, as Anna and Karim set stakes where the ruins ended and the open desert began. The wind had erased footprints from the night, but not the conviction in Anna's chest. She studied the manuscript once more, her finger resting on the line that had guided everything, where the sun's last shadow falls. Her father's cramped handwriting in the margin returned like a whisper from another life. When the sun kneels, the stone will speak. Karim jammed a staff upright into the sand. A gnomon, Anna said softly. We'll follow the shadow at sunset. She sighted along a row of half-buried stones that formed a barely perceptible arc. They weren't random, she could see it now. They were a calendar, a patient line of markers meant to align with a dying day. Harland approached with practiced indifference, but his eyes tracked every movement. A pretty ritual, he drawled. When it fails, we move on to real work. Inside, a drumbeat of panic kept time with his pulse. If it succeeds, I must be the first name attached to it. No mistakes. They worked through the heat, clearing sand from the base of a low ridge where an odd masonry bulge jutted like a buried knuckle. Karim's trowel rang against something harder than sandstone. He brushed gently. A flat slab appeared too regular, too smooth to be natural. Anna pressed her palm to it and felt the faintest give, as if the desert itself had been holding its breath. By late afternoon, a gold haze washed everything. Anna adjusted the staff and chalked a thin line along the sand as the shadow crept. The wind died. Even the flies seemed to still. The shadow lengthened, trembled, and then at the exact second, the sun kissed the horizon. It touched a shallow groove carved into the face of the slab. Anna's breath left her. There. Karim's eyes widened. Praise be. Harlan stepped forward so quickly he kicked sand over their chalk line. We document this under my authority, he said, voice clipped. Any report, any call comes from me. Anna didn't look up. We don't have a tomb yet, she replied. We have a door that wants to be asked the right question. She traced the groove. It divided into 3 branching cuts, each ending in a tiny symbol dulled by time. She recognized them not as letters, but as instructions. The manuscript's odd, repeated markings, the ones so many scribes would have called decorative, were a sequence for pressure points. She pictured her father at the dining table, guiding her tiny hands across puzzle boxes he brought from digs. Gentle, Annie. Locks prefer patience to force. Stand back, she murmured. She pressed the first tip with the base of her palm and waited. A muted click answered from within the slab. Sand trickled from hairline seams. Harland moved closer, impatience gnawing at his restraint. If she delays, I take over, he thought. If she fails, I declare it a safety hazard and end this farce. Out loud, he said, this is absurdly risky. We need engineered tools. Pressure lock, Anna said, touching the second point. Another click, deeper this time, like a throat clearing, after 3,000 years of silence. The third symbol was almost gone. She dusted it with a camel hair brush, her hand shaking. Then she pressed. A low groan rumbled beneath their feet. The slab shivered, then shifted a finger's width. A seam split along its right edge, exhaling a thread of ancient air that smelled of cedar and dust. Karim made the sign his grandfather had taught him. She answers, he whispered. Harland lunged to the gap. Crowbars, he barked to the porters. Lights, cameras ready. He threw Anna a smile as brittle as desert glass. Well done, Miss Carter. Step aside. Anna blocked him with her body. We open it properly. If there's a relieving system behind this, the wrong force could collapse the chamber. That word properly stabbed at Harlan's pride. Internal heat surged. She speaks to me like a peer, like a superior. He snapped his fingers anyway. Bars. Now. Revelation slid through Anna like cold water. A half-remembered story her father had told. After a museum gala when she was 8. He'd laughed at the champagne, then grown solemn. There was a man who stole a junior's work and called it mentorship. Beware the men who erase names. She could see it now, not a vague warning, but a memory of a headline photo. Professor Harland receiving an award alone. The graduate who had uncovered the key pottery shard unnamed in the caption. The junior had left the field. Stop, Anna said, louder. This stone sits in a socketed cradle. The manuscript suggests the release is internal. She slid her fingers into the seam and felt for a counterweight pin. There, a cool nub of metal, oxidized to green. She teased it free with a loop of wire and a prayer. The slab yielded. With a sigh like a tired god, it pivoted inward on hidden pivots, spilling stale air over their faces. The passage beyond was a wedge of darkness cut into bedrock, its ceiling painted with flakes of midnight blue that caught the last light and turned it to stars. On the jamb, a cartouche had been hacked to oblivion. Except within the oval, minuscule incisions had been cut where no casual chisel would dare. A name encoded not in letters, but in a pattern Anna alone recognized from the manuscript's decorations. Karim's voice was reverent. They erased her, then she etched herself back, where only the patient would see. Harlan lifted a hand toward the carving, the professor in him unable, for a breath, to be anything but awed. Then ambition snapped the leash. He straightened, turned to the team, and raised his voice. Record, entry made, under the direction of Professor Edwin Harland, at 18 to 42 local. Anna's head snapped toward him. Don't you dare! He met her glare without blinking. You are a student on my expedition. The words were an escalation, a line crossed with no return. Light cut a path into the first chamber. Gold did not blaze. Instead, restraint and order greeted them. Sealed jars, wrapped bundles, a limestone stele lying face down, as if protecting what it said. Anna knelt and brushed the dust from its back. Lines of text ran with purpose. At the bottom, a smaller hand had added a final sentence, barely more than a breath. She will be remembered by the one who finishes what her father began. Anna's vision blurred. Her father's notebook trembled in her grip. He wasn't only chasing legend. He was following someone else's last defense. Behind her, Harlan's phone camera clicked. Smile, Miss Carter. History loves a good assistant. The air inside shifted colder. Somewhere in the stone, a second mechanism prepared for the next test the desert, measuring not only their hands, but their hearts. They entered single file, lamps breathing halos into the dust. The passage narrowed, then opened into a chamber whose ceiling shimmered with flecks of blue and gold, like a pocket of night trapped underground. Jars stood in ranked silence, cords intact, seals impressed with a sigil that repeated the barely there pattern Anna had followed for months. The air pressed cool on her skin. Her heart thrummed with equal parts awe and dread. Do not rush, she told herself. Locks prefer patience to force. Harlan shouldered past, angling his light to the far wall. Film this, he commanded. State. Principal Investigator Harland enters the primary chamber. The words tasted like victory on his tongue. This is mine, his mind crowed. A lifetime justified by a single sentence. Then his beam caught a limestone stele lying face down. The same piece Anna had uncovered, only now its edges protruded, as if it had been deliberately set aside. Help me turn it, Anna said. Karim knelt with her. Together they rocked the slab gently and lowered it to the sand. Text ran neatly across its face, priestly hands, asking gods to guard a nameless queen, and at the base a private voice again, almost a whisper carved by a steadier, smaller hand. Let those who erase names find themselves forgotten. Harlan snorted. Pious threats for thieves. But the phrase snagged on memory, an embarrassment he'd sealed away. Years ago, a conference in Geneva, a junior researcher challenging his reading of a fragment that hinted at a woman's erased reign. He'd humiliated her from the podium, called it projection. She left academia within a year. She was reckless, he told himself. I saved the field from her fantasies. His chest tightened anyway. Karim's lamp slid toward a plastered doorway painted with stars. Anna traced its edge. Secondary seal, she murmured. If we breach wrong, we lose the chamber. We breach now, Harlan said, already fitting a chisel. No, Anna snapped. Look. She pointed to 3 palm-sized rosettes stamped along the lintel. A triad release. The rosettes are a code. The code lived in her bones. the rhythm of the manuscript's decorations, the puzzle boxes of her childhood. She pressed each rosette in order, waiting for the faintest change in resistance. On the third, a soft slump sighed through the plaster. A hairline fracture traced itself like a drawn breath, and a panel loosened without a crumble of dust. Beyond it, darkness breathed again. "Record," Harlan said to the camera. Under Professor Harlan's direction, the inner seal. "Stop lying," Anna cut in. Her voice rang, sure and fierce. "You followed my map, used my coordinates, my translation. Say it right." Silence coiled. The team's faces hovered, uncertain. Harlan felt heat rise under his collar. "She dares to name it," the thought flared. "If I allow this tone once, I will never command a room again." Out loud he said, "Too smooth. Credit will be assigned in due course." They stepped through. The sanctum was smaller, intimate. A stone dais, a low sarcophagus shrouded in linen, darkened with time, a heap of offerings arranged with painful care. On the dais lay a narrow box of cedar, carvings precise as handwriting. Anna lifted the lid with 2 fingers. Inside, wrapped in brittle linen, a reed pen, a bronze knife, and a ring worked with the same defiant sigil. Her breath caught. She dug into her pack, pulled her father's notebook, and slid an old sketch under the lamp. The sketches matched detail for detail the knife's serpent hilt, the ring's pattern. A note in her father's hand. Not ours to take, ours to witness. Heat burned behind her eyes. He stood at this threshold, she thought, dizzy with grief and gratitude. He touched what I touch. Harlan saw the match and felt the floor tilt. She will anchor this to her dead father, and the world will drown me in sentiment. He reached for the ring. Artifact handling is my purview. Anna closed the box and pulled it to her chest. Number. The ceiling creaked a stone's minute shift, answering the human change in air, as if listening. Karim's head snapped up. "Careful," he warned. "She weighs hearts." Harlan laughed without humor. Superstition doesn't bend granite. Still, his palms were wet. He barked to an assistant. "Crate the sarcophagus." Quickly. Anna's stomach turned. "You'll collapse the lid if you lever the corners," she said. "There's likely a counterweight. My sight. My methods." His chisel bit at a joint. A whispering rain began along the walls. Sand sifting from hidden seams. Anna saw, with a lurch, the purpose of a narrow stone tongue protruding near the floor. A reset pin wedged behind a carved lotus. She dropped to her knees, slid the ring wire she'd fashioned earlier, and teased. The tongue shivered, then seated with a reassuring click. The whispering slowed. The chamber exhaled. Harlan stared. Anger, awe, and a sliver of fear tangling in his ribcage. She saved us. An honest thought confessed, and was strangled by pride. "Stand aside," he said hoarsely. "You're in over your head." "No," Anna answered, softer now, but immovable. "You are." Karim lifted his lamp to a low frieze behind the dais. The gold leaf there had been vandalized, the central cartouche hacked to emptiness. Yet within the void, the tiniest incisions glittered like stars. Not letters, intervals. Anna's heart leaped. She laid the manuscript beside the frieze, aligning pattern to pattern. The void resolved itself into a name spelled by spaces. The queen who was not supposed to exist. Anna whispered it, barely a breath, and the name felt like warm water on cold stone. At the final interval, a concealed latch yielded. The sarcophagus lid unsealed with a sigh. "Camera," Harlan rasped. He elbowed forward, hands shaking. "Document the moment, Professor Harlan." Karim's voice cut across him. "Enough." He held up his phone, its screen recording bright. "It has been filming since we reached the slab outside. All of it. The lines you spoke, the credit you took." His gaze was steady, ancestral pride in it. "This tomb has waited for truth. We will give her that." For a heartbeat, Harlan's mind went white. "End this," something begged. "Tell the truth. Share it. Step back and you will still be remembered." The plea curdled on contact with fear. He lunged for Karim's phone. The motion clipped the lamp. Flame flared, then guttered. Shadows lurched. A jar toppled and cracked. "Stop!" Anna's voice ricocheted off stone. She caught the lamp, steadied it, and turned, chest heaving. "You will not erase another name." The words arrived from someplace older than her throat, older than the room. She slid her fingers again to the lotus tongue, calming the chamber, calming herself. When the light settled, the lid had shifted enough to reveal a sliver inside. Linen fine as breath. A small mask's cheek, catching the glow. There was no torrent of gold, only the devastating intimacy of a life prepared for remembrance and then denied it. On the inner lip of the sarcophagus, a line of micro-incisions ran like a heartbeat monitor. Anna read them, voice shaking. "Let my true name live in the mouth of the one who comes without greed." To finish what her father began, the room's silence swelled until it was almost song. Karim bowed his head. "Say it," he murmured. Anna spoke the name again fully, this time, steady, granting, recording. Karim's phone caught every syllable, every tremor. Harlan stood frozen, the future rearranging around a truth he could not choke back down into darkness. Outside, the desert shifted its weight. Inside, the Queen's silence changed texture, no longer erasure, but presence. And in the wavering lamplight, the old order authority propped on arrogance, credit built from theft cracked like a jar under the slightest rightful touch. 3 months later, the desert's breath was cooler at dawn, and the scaffolds around the entry slab gleamed like reeds of sunlight. The tomb was sealed again properly, after weeks of measured documentation by Egypt's Antiquities Council, with Anna listed as principal discoverer and Karim as field steward. A hand-carved limestone plaque now stood near the gnomon socket, the Queen's true name incised not with boastful letters, but with the same patient pattern of intervals Anna had first read by lamplight. Travelers paused there and fell quiet, without being told why. The world had already chosen its story. Karim's unbroken footage, Harlan's claims, Anna's corrections, the precise sequence that opened stone without harm, had circulated faster than any press release. Students sent messages from classrooms where teachers paused the video at the moment. Anna steadied the lamp and said, "You will not erase another name." Curators wrote to ask about the micro-incisions and the cadence of a name spelled by spaces. A museum consortium offered funding for a community archive in Karim's village, so his grandfather's stories could be kept, not just retold. Anna moved through those days like a runner who has found her breath. She gave interviews sparingly, choosing instead to work in the field lab, annotating fragments and drafting the monograph. Its dedication was one line: "For my father, who taught me that locks prefer patience to force." When she wrote it, she felt his hand over hers as surely as she had in childhood, guiding her along puzzle box seams. The university convened a review of Professor Harlan's conduct. He arrived in a suit that fit like armor and delivered practiced phrases about misunderstandings of chain of command. But the recordings did not care for tone. A panel of colleagues, some who had once applauded his severity, watched themselves age as they listened. The director's title was removed. Grants were reassigned. Harlan kept his lecturer's contract, but not his authority to lead digs. On the evening the decision came, he sat alone in his office. The desks gleamed too bright, the plaques on his wall suddenly heavy. The video's worst moment, his barked, "Smile, Miss Carter." History loves a good assistant looped in his skull until it sounded like someone else's voice. He pulled a box file from a high shelf, one he had not opened in years. Old conference programs, rejected letters, drafts of papers that had left other names off their bylines. Near the bottom lay a single-page note dated more than a decade ago. "Professor Harlan," it read, in a spare, careful hand, "I am writing to ask your advice about a manuscript whose decorative intervals may actually encode directional cues. I cannot yet prove it, but I would be grateful for your guidance. Daniel Carter." He recognized the surname with a jolt that emptied him. I ignored the father's letter. I mocked the daughter in public. A thought rose that was not defensive and not rhetorical, simply naked. I did not become a guardian of facts. I became a guardian of my fear. He closed his eyes and, for the first time in months, did not plan a counter-argument. He wrote a letter, not to the panel or to the press, but to Anna. He did not request forgiveness or a meeting. He only acknowledged what was true, that he had tried to erase a name and that the work had not been his to claim. He enclosed the old letter from her father and mailed it without the protection of registered post. Weeks later, at a colloquium in Cairo, Anna spoke about the small hand at the stele's base, the private voice that had carved, "Let those who erase names find themselves forgotten." She explained how the queen's priests, loyal yet unwilling to betray her completely, had hidden a counter-history in intervals anyone could see and almost no one would read. She described the reset tongue near the floor and the way the chamber sighed when it was treated gently. "Humility is not only a virtue," she said to a room that needed the sentence. "It is a method." Karim sat in the back with folded hands and pride that did not need to be spoken aloud. When the applause faded, he found Anna at the courtyard fountain and gave her a small, wrapped packet, old cassette tapes from his grandfather, labeled in pencil. "He wanted the queen to have a librarian," Karim said, smiling. "Now she has two." That night, Anna returned to the site. The guard unlocked the chain and nodded her through. She stood the gnomon upright and watched the shadow draw its thin line over the sand. When it touched the groove, she did not open anything. She just whispered the queen's name fully, with the care of a promise, and let the wind carry it down into stone. A stray thought visited, tender and unambitious. My father would have stood exactly here, grinning like a boy. Harlan watched the same dusk from a different city, grading papers at his kitchen table. He paused over an essay by a first year who had challenged him in class with more curiosity than caution. He had nearly written a curt, "Stay within the literature," in the margin. Instead, he set down his pen and read the paragraph again. The student's idea was raw, even clumsy, but something in it reached beyond the safe edges. "Do not become a guardian of your fear," he told himself, and wrote, "Develop this. Try it. Carefully. Show me you're working next week." He thought of the letter he had mailed and did not check his inbox to see if it had been received. The point was not reply. It was repair. At sunrise, Cruz placed the archive's first boxes into the village center, copies of records, transcriptions of legends, prints of stills from the excavation that showed hands, not faces, doing the careful work. In a glass case, the cedar box rested closed. A small plaque quoting the private line Anna had wept over, "Not ours to take, ours to witness." School children pressed their palms to the glass and promised to be gentle. With time, the queen's name returned to maps and syllabi. Not triumphantly, not in capitals, but steadily, the way a river reclaims an old bed. The moral was not subtle, and Anna refused to make it vague. To her students, to the cameras when she could not avoid them, she said it plainly. Truth favors patience over force, care over conquest, memory over credit. And whenever someone asked about Harlan, she answered not with relish, but with a small, true sentence. Humility came late, but it came. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel to discover more stories about how extraordinary people turn humiliation into triumph.